So set championships start this weekend. DLC Bologna is also this weekend, and I wanted to talk about kind of the best decks in the room and why I think each deck could potentially win the DLC. Some of these may be like, duh, that's not really a hot take whatsoever. But I also have a top 64 prediction. We'll see how close we can get top 8. And then I'll actually give you my prediction for which deck takes down the entire event. So are there going to be any surprises in that top 64? Who knows? Who knows? I knows. I do. But Blurple, the elephant in the room, literally. Why does Blurple stand a good chance of winning? Well, sheer numbers, first off. And second off, it is such a great toolbox in the fact that it's so consistent and it has such a good early presence, especially due to ramp, and then a very, very strong late game. And you may say its early presence isn't that great. I don't mean going wide. I mean strong characters as early as turn 3, such as Genie, Iago, Madam Mim Elephant, things of that sort. And then you just have so much utility, like from Ursula's to Elsa's, exerting your opponent's characters. And then Monstro helping out a lot into your Baja matchups, being able to 2-for-1 things like Scrooge and Clarabelle, or you have John Silver's in there as well, Baymax. These 5/5, 5/6 characters. Never mind, it's going to do something there, but decided not to. But these 5/5, 5/6 characters, being able to play a rush character like Monstro from your hand and being able to 2-for-1 them is really, really strong. And part of why we've been seeing Blurple decks start to claw back against Baja is largely in part to Monstro being played once again, which I do think is absolutely the correct call. So mirror matches are going to have to be a thing. If you want to play Blurple in an event like this, you have to be comfortable in the mirror match. If you're not comfortable in the mirror match, you need to find a different deck, point blank, because in say the 12 rounds that you go, there's a good chance you play a minimum of 5 mirrors, more likely probably somewhere between 5 to 8 mirror matches. Very, very likely that you'll run into, whether you're IDing, things like that. Maybe it changes it, but you must be comfortable in the mirror if you're going to play Blurple. But just because the sheer numbers and the fact that the deck is really, really strong and really, really, really consistent, that's why Blurple can obviously win. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about a deck like that. The next one I'm going to bring up is Amethyst Steel. And why can Amethyst Steel win? Well, when you have things like Madam Mim on turn 2, which allow your Dumbo to take out a Genie, it allows your Genie to take out a Dumbo. It allows your Elsa to take out a Dumbo. It allows your Jafar 2-drop to take out Dumbos or Genies. I mean, it takes out Dumbo already, but to take out Genie also. She puts in so much work, and having the challenging presence to handle other decks, though, of the format, like your Amber Steel Aggro, your Sea Dogs, these other quicker decks that we've been seeing popping up, you have a pretty good matchup into them. As far as Baja goes, you're a little bit favored there too. Blurple's really the one matchup that you're not favored into, and if that's the big one in the room, maybe that's a problem. But at the same time, this deck can still beat Blurple. Like, absolutely. 1, you can go under them, or 2, you don't really want to get into a late grindy game versus Blurple. You want to kind of put the pedal to the metal, go a little bit faster, if you will. But like I said, being able to control the evasives while also at the same time threatening the lore and putting the pressure on them that they have to answer your board now, and they can't just kind of go slower and take control of the game that way. You can beat Blurple, but it's not, you're going to be unfavored there. But otherwise, across the board, your matchups are actually pretty solid. And that's why I think that Amethyst Steel has a pretty good chance to go ahead and take down the DLC. Baja Blast is the next one. And, well, I mean, kind of the opposite of Purple Steel, right? This time, you actually have a good matchup into Blurple. And I've seen some things that say it's not that great. And I've played Blurple a ton. And I've been playing this deck quite a lot for the last month too, now grinding it out, deciding what I want to play for DLC Milwaukee. And when I'm playing this deck, I love the Blurple matchup, and when I'm playing Blurple, I don't really care for this matchup. And that's not to say it can't go either which direction, but I definitely think Baja is still favored into that. Like I said, Monstro definitely puts in a lot of work for Blurple. You need to be able to respect that, and there's some other changes Like, personally, I think Bend to My Will is insane versus Blurple. I don't think Under the Sea is crazy good. Heads Held High makes Under the Sea really good. But needing, like, the perfect storm is a little lackluster. But, like, Bend to My Will is just huge in that matchup, in my personal opinion. But just a little thought there. Otherwise, like I said, when we're looking across our matchups, we already mentioned Tempo isn't the greatest matchup for this deck, but you're actually pretty good against like Amber Steel. Sea Dogs can be a little sketchy because unlike Amber Steel, they do play Ursula to hit that Under the Sea when you're trying to claw your way back into the game. But just across the board, the deck has such a good top end, and your 5/5s, your 5/4s, your 5/6s, your 6/7s. That's what we were going to say earlier. I think most of my target audience is over the age of that, hopefully. But I tell you what, having kids in school, I hear it. I hear it a lot. But I do think that this deck has a pretty good chance, just based off the fact that it's got a good Blurple matchup. So just right there, I think it puts it into a solid position to win. But it's not just a one-trick pony. It does have good matchups. Into, like I said, Amber Steel, I think, is actually a decent matchup. And there's going to be times where those aggressive decks just go under you, and there's nothing you can do about it. But having Under the Sea there, and not necessarily on turn 3, unless they go like Aurora Tiana into Lady, play a card, turn 3 Under the Sea probably isn't really on your radar. It's more like turn 4, turn 5, when you're down like 11, 12, 0, and they have 4, 5, 6 characters on board. That's when you hit them with the Under the Sea. Doing it on turn 3, like I said, unless they hit that playline of like Aurora Tiana, Lady into like Nala, if they're not hitting that playline, you shouldn't be going turn 3 Under the Sea versus that deck anyway. And Clarabelle Shift, unless you're doing it to sing Under the Sea, I would definitely prioritize, like, I mean, I guess she's inkable, whereas Baymax isn't. But like going for like Scrooge or Baymax or other play lines, I would go for instead of the Clarabelle Shift, because aggro decks don't typically have a lot of cards in their hand anyway. Speaking of one of those aggro decks, well, if you want a deck that's just linear, easy to play, and across the board does what it needs to do, and if you're good at die rolls, this is a great deck that sometimes it just outright wins solely because it won the die roll and you open the hand. This deck has insane hands that feel just downright unbeatable at times, and I think that's enough to push it into why this deck could potentially win. You are slightly favored into Blurple. Like I said, Baja I don't think is. Purple Steel, we already mentioned, is slightly unfavored. Sea Dogs can hurt because playing Under the Sea versus this deck is strong, but I don't think there's another deck in the game like this deck where if you just open your absolute insane hand, your win percentage is probably the best in the game out of any other deck opening like the crazy hand. So like Blurple, Baja, Purple Steel, if any of those decks open their absolute dream hand, they're probably winning the game, but they're probably in like a on the play dream hand, 75-80% of the time they're going to win, if not maybe a little higher. This deck on the play, if you open your dream hand, it's probably like 90-95% of the time you win that game. And there's not another deck like that, I don't think, where you just outright win the game just because of how you open your hand and you're on the play. One more deck that I think truly could take down the event, it's going to be Sea Dogs. I've been talking about it, and I've been high on this deck for a little minute now. And I think it's because it's just so good into the quicker decks right now. Like, it's got a pretty good Blurple matchup. It's got a decent Baja matchup because you do have Ursula for their Under the Sea, which is really their only comeback play for you. That's why I think Baja is a little better against this deck than Blurple, because it has that straight up board wipe. But otherwise, you just attempt to go underneath both of them, which realistically is not that insanely hard. But then versus like Amber Steel, you have Under the Sea, you have Tramp too, like Tramp on turn like 4, turn 3, and if you're doing that either way, like playing Under the Sea on turn 4 or 5, like I said a little bit ago, that's actually the ideal time to play it anyway. So Under the Sea in this deck absolutely goes hard. Tramp is insane, Under the Sea is insane. So you can do really well versus aggressive decks and versus the slower decks also. I do think Purple Steel is very difficult. I think that's not a great matchup whatsoever because Madam Mim essentially makes like Calhoun one-shot your entire deck, and you don't get any damage for it. Things like Merryweather and Tramp are going to help you out a lot because you play them, give some strength to like a Bobby, to a Nala, to characters like that where they don't really have a strong questing presence. So you do that in order to win the board state versus those decks. You don't just always go to Lady to quest for 3 and be like, I just got to put the pedal down and win. Sometimes you have to, play I got to win the board state back. And that's where Merryweather and Tramp come in. And I think those cards are insanely strong for that regard. Also, Scrump feels, in testing, like Scrump has felt so not great, right? So like versus Blurple and versus Baja, you go under them. Scrump isn't really needed because if you're into that late of a game where that matters, you're probably losing anyway. And then versus Amber Steel, their characters are weak enough outside of Rhino that it doesn't really come up either. I mean, versus Rhino, it's a great card. Purple Steel, though, Scrump puts in a lot of work versus Purple Steel because it hits the things like Calhoun, like the Genie Dragon. And I personally am playing Scrump at 2, but at 3 it still makes sense. There's also the song, but now you're trying to have like 12 singing power, and I get if you have the 8 singing power you can just hard play the Lost in the Woods, but at that point I do think Scrump is just the better option if you're looking for a way to modulate their attack strength down. But absolutely, this deck is so much fun, and I saw it in Lorcana Villains podcast with like Humble, Ed, and Dale talking about the deck, and honestly I couldn't agree more. Like that, it's very much so an aggressive deck, but it also has intricate combo lines that you can't just straight up play it like a aggro deck all the time. Like there's lines, like I said, with like Merryweather and Tramp where you actually have to win the board state back, and I think that the deck's a little more resilient than they were giving it credit for. It definitely can have the wheels fall off on it, but overall, I think the deck is actually pretty strong, and I do like a lot of things going for it. There's also obviously Chroma Dogs, where you're playing Chromacon instead of like the Under the Sea. Potentially play both if you look at your uninkable count and make some concessions there too, just to help other matchups, especially like that Purple Steel one, so they start losing their characters if they're challenging you. But I do think that this deck is in a sneaky position to actually surprise people and do pretty well. So these are the 5 decks that truly I think have a chance to win. What about topping? So 2,048 players and top 64. What do I think the top 64 is going to be? I think Blurple's going to take the majority of the cake. I'm going to go with 25. So 39% of top cut I think is going to be Blurple. I'm going to put Purple Steel actually as a second place deck with 14. I think Baja is going to be right behind them at 12. Amber Steel maybe like 7 or so. Sea Dogs, I think there's going to be 3 of them that make it. Blue Steel Allies a couple. And honestly, do not be surprised if Amethyst Emerald has one sneak into top cut. I think the deck is underexplored. Better than people give it credit. Not quite there yet, though. But I really, truly think that somebody's going to take it there and make top 64 with it. And we'll see what happens. However, that's kind of like a general, like, oh, that's a, top 64 is really easy. You get those 4 decks, give Blurple anywhere between like 25 and 40% top cut. Then the next 3, give them anywhere between 10 and 25%, and then just fill in the last like 5-6 spots with whatever. I get it. So top 8, I'm still not going to be that crazy spicy. I think 3 Blurple make it, 2 Purple Steel, 2 Baja, and I think one of the Sea Dogs goes on a run and makes it into the top 8. And I know, still not that spicy. Unfortunately, the format is not that spicy. It's pretty well, settled in, and doesn't mean things can't happen, doesn't mean things can't change, but for the most part, I don't think there's too much craziness to expect at an event like this. And I will say, though, what do I think is going to win the event? I do not think Blurple wins this event. I'm going to go, if I had to pick one deck most likely to win, I think it's Baja. If it's not Baja, Sea Dogs. And if it's not Sea Dogs, Amethyst Steel. I think that the finals is going to be Baja over Purple Steel. That's going to be my pick right now for the finals, or Baja over Blurple. Outside of that, though, I think top 4, it'll be. I think Purple Steel's going to knock off the Sea Dogs in top 8. Unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen. Hopefully not. I'm pulling for the deck. I really am. Or Blurple, because I've been a long time Blurple player. It's just hard to root for a deck that's, the deck to beat. So I'm taking a format away from it. We're separated. We're going to get back together, but we're separated for right now. But top 8, I think it's going to be like Purple Steel's going to knock off Sea Dogs. One of the Purple Steel is going to get knocked off by Blurple. And then the 2 Bajas, one Baja is going to take out a Blurple, and Blurple's going to take out the other Baja, which leaves us with 1 Baja, 1 Purple Steel, and 2 Blurples. And obviously, depending where pairings go, I'm going to say, maybe Baja and Purple Steel get paired. Baja pulls it out. Blurple mirror match. Blurple obviously goes. And then Baja takes out Blurple. Let me know what you guys think, though, down below. And don't forget, I do have this spreadsheet on down below where I track the tops and everything in the format. And I've been kind of working on a little project. And maybe you disagree with me. Obviously, this is looking at ink decks, looking at Lorcanito. Both of them have meta matrix spreadsheets. Between that and playing games and hands-on experience and in real life playing also, because I do think that there's a big thing to online data where obviously ink decks is based on real life events, but like Lorcanito, a lot of people go on Lorcanito just to test ideas. So you can't just take everything on there as scripture. You can't take it as these are how the matchups are. There's 3,000 tests. But out of those 3,000 tests, there's a good chance that 10, 15, maybe even a little bit more percent of it were people testing ideas. So it's not truly a amazing resource. It's an amazing resource, but I mean there's a little bit more to it if you look into it. So this is kind of using what they do and kind of putting it together in like a little mini form. Kind of like matchups. So on the left, Blurple, obviously Blurple versus Baja, not great. Red, the darker the color, the better or the worse the matchup is. But like I said, people are going to disagree, and that's perfectly fine. We all have different experiences playing. But I just took arguably the 10 best decks, put it all kind of together. Hopefully a nice little resource for you guys. And again, you can see at the bottom, I do need to start a new tab now that we're into October. Also, Infinity format, there hasn't been that many events, so there's not a whole lot of information to put out there. So I might get rid of that tab. But just tracking the format tops and then all that good stuff. But thank you guys for watching. As always, like, share, subscribe. We're 50 subscribers away from giving a box of Fabled away. We're right there, guys. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's hit that goal. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Have a good one.